for women in Yemen and women in Syria, and for women who don't have this luxury of having their voice heard. So one of the most recent things we've done, and we found great outcome, is we realized that Syria, for example, is the most documented conflict on earth. There's no conflict that has been documented that well. So you can now actually go to Amnesty website and have a 360 degrees view of Aleppo, the most dangerous place on earth. You can go there, you can see the destruction, you can walk through Aleppo. It's that sort of documentation that now we expect in a conflict country. When 40 years ago you'd barely have 1 or 2 photos from a conflict country. So it's very well documented. Unfortunately, the way it impacts women is completely missing. We have numbers of male victims and women victims, male survivors and women survivors, that sort of things. But the way it's impacting them is completely missing. So we worked with our partners, women groups working inside Syria and in neighboring countries, on sitting and developing our skills, all of us, to try and analyze how things impact women differently. And the outcome was amazing. It's all in their heads. They never thought of putting it on paper. First, because nobody cares. They've never been asked how things impact them differently. And second, because if the irony of lives being so cheap, the fact that people die in the hundreds and sometimes thousands on a daily basis and nobody look at it, so they feel it's undue attention if we ask, but how does that impact you differently? How does it impact you as from a gender perspective, but also from an individual perspective? Tell me, how did your life become more difficult? And we found that women find it very, very hard to say, I lost my right to movement, right to freedom of movement. My daughters are no longer getting education when they see people dying. They just feel that they don't have the luxury of discussing this. So when we sat and said, this is what we need to do, we need to analyze, you on behalf of all the communities you live in and work in, need to analyze how this impacts you differently. The outcome was fascinating. The 2 examples I gave to you about how the lack of movement, so the use of explosive weapons, doesn't allow them to get to hospitals. And I'll give you an example that we found in that workshop. OCHA, the UN Humanitarian Assistance Agency, has done, publishes numbers about healthcare, about injuries and so on. And one of the numbers was that cesarean operations have raised to sometimes 81% in communities where there's absolutely no healthcare. And their reading of it was that, oh, healthcare is fantastic. 81% of pregnant women are going and getting cesareans when the universal average is 17%. The woman who we sat with told us that this is actually the worst case of collapse of health system. Because these women know that most probably if they wait until they're naturally due, until they deliver naturally, the chances are that they'll die in their houses without the chance to go to a hospital or to a health center. First, because all of them are destroyed due to air attacks, and second, because even if they were there, they might not reach to them because of the extensive use of explosive weapons. So they, any minute in their 8th month or 9th month where they have good enough chances of their fetus coming out alive, they go to any healthcare provider. That could be a doctor, a nurse, person who have been around a nurse long enough, anyone who can cut them open and get that baby out of them, because that makes the chances more likely of them and their babies surviving. So it's the women who we worked with who told us this very small fact that OCHA completely missed, that other organizations who you expect have the best professionals completely didn't notice. Same for, we realized that women are more likely to have malnutrition in siege. Besiegement is one of the techniques that are very extensively used in Syria, both by the Syrian regime and later on by some armed groups. And we realized that women are more likely to get malnourished. And the women who we work with told us that because women do all the searching for food. They're the ones who go and search for food. They're the ones who go and queue for hours and hours in front of any available aid because men are too proud to go and queue for food. They are the ones who do all the cooking, and they are the ones who eat absolutely least and definitely last. They feed their children, they make sure their husbands are fed, they make sure elderlies are fed, and then they eat, which very, very scarce resources anyway. So I won't take you through the entire report. We were only allowed to submit 10 pages to the Universal Periodic Review. So it only looks at one perpetrator, which is the Syrian government, and it only looks at 8 different issues. But I think the practice was very important. I think more importantly than the report, we have created and developed the urge to analyze how things impact women differently, how arms impact them differently, why do women get more harmed if individual men have small arms, and so on. So we find our duty to take this knowledge, these recommendations, what they want, and bring it internationally. That's the very small role that we have, but that they think is very important. We also we also try to bring these experiences into international policies around the response to conflict and also about aid. Last year there was the Humanitarian Summit, which was supposed to be the big summit that reconsiders how aid is being provided in conflict areas, but also in natural disaster in any case, and how they make that more humanitarian. And many organizations, including WILPF and others, we lobbied together and provided evidence-based documents saying that there's no way aid will reach to those in most need if women groups, local women groups, were not completely involved in first putting aid strategies, second implementing aid strategies, and monitoring aid strategies. Unless we make sure that they are at the center of the aid process, it never goes to the right people. It never goes to a development role. It never goes to development goals. It could go to useless issues or even destructive issues like buying arms, like supporting groups against others, and so on. So our partners do analysis and advocacy. Participation, we have seen how we tried. One of the things that we assessed by our partners in different countries is their need to find a space to communicate. There's a professor who told us that in Northern Ireland, when the women were trying to have a better role in the conflict and in the conflict resolution, it was very easy because they could just go to each other's houses and meet and discuss and chat. And we really realized how in places where there's a big displacement movement, that's not a possibility. Our Yemeni partners, for example, in a matter of few weeks, they are in 14 different countries. Our 14 partners are everywhere because they were never allowed to go back to their country after the most recent attack. Same for our partners in Syria, who are everywhere. This space to communicate is no longer available, so we try to create it. And we were lucky enough to see first how this communication is happening and how the exchange is happening, but also to give the chance to people in different stages of the conflict to support each other. So for example, 2 years ago we had a big meeting for women from Bosnia and Syria, and our Bosnian partners said that has been extremely important to them because as they go through their experiences to convey it to their Syrian partners, they managed to revisit their experience of 20 years, of what they've done right, what they've done wrong, what did they want, and how do they analyze it 20 years later. And that group actually worked together to do the 2014 conference, still work together now. And that was very similar for our Syrian partners, who first found out that the awful position they're in is not unique. It has happened before. It could happen again. Now they are asking us to arrange a meeting for them and for Ukrainian women so they can tell them what to do and what not to do, what to try, what to give a chance. So last thing I want to say is that I think what we do and what you all can contribute to is to look at the displacement and migration movement beyond its very, very final manifestations, which actually people arriving to new countries and what to do about them then. It's about looking at people who don't want to take part in hostilities. They never chose to be in war. They never chose a conflict to be in their country. All they want is to live, to have minimum, to have their human rights, but also minimum conditions to continue their life. I think women groups in country do that, and I think they deserve all the support possible. And the way we can support them is in few ways. First one is to know, and this bit you all have done already, at least to attempt to know more about what is mainstream media not telling us. Sometimes when I watch mainstream media in this country, I think that migrants and refugees just fell from the sky. Nothing happened, and we woke up and found them all here. So we need to know what's not being told to us and what conditions people are fleeing and how a difference could be made about them. And we need to act. And we were discussing this morning how can that, unfortunately, the way politics are happening are making us feel that our individual voices could not make a difference, that we're not strong enough, or that there's so many influences and bigger powers that are deciding for us, and that's true. I still think we can make a difference. If not in the end actions, which we will collectively and on the long term, but changing the discourse about refugees and migrants, changing the discourse about people in entire societies. And we were in the AWID forum last week, and we had a very heated conversation about religious fundamentalism. And there was some feminist views that unfortunately painted entire societies with one big white brush, accusing groups, very large groups of people, to be the cause of this act or this terrorist act or this new fears that are posed to us. And I genuinely believe if the feminist movement did not stand strong and clearly against all sorts of discrimination, particularly discrimination that attack entire societies far, far away, and get them to have to defend themselves, like women groups we work with, where suddenly 100 organizations from around the world want them to combat violent extremism. And none of them identify what they do as combating violent extremism, because they think what they do is the norm. So for example, what they do in education, in combating child recruitment, in providing healthcare and providing supporting civic peace, none of them would call that combating violent extremism. So we need to take their knowledge and their experiences into calling things what we want to call. It cannot be transferred that way. It has to be transferred the other way around. And they know exactly, if anything, violent extremism impact people in local societies 2 million times more than it impacts people far, far away. It's people in this society who have their own freedoms limited, their ability to move limited. Much of their life is being completely changed, and they know how to fight it, and we need to support them fight it the way they feel fighting it is going to happen. And the last thing we can do is inform. Changing the discourse is not only the mainstream media discourse, it's also our day-to-day discourse. And I know we're all put as individuals and as small groups in that corner where we feel it's too complicated, I'll just choose not to know about it tomorrow, and I'll sit tomorrow, not to know about it today, and I'll sit tomorrow and try to understand this conflict in Libya. And I think we can take a step back and just think about the very basic things that we do know. We do know that explosive weapons are being used extensively against civilians in both, at least, Yemen and Syria, and that's no way it could be justified. So that's one thing we know. We also know that most of the people killed in both countries are civilians, and that's no way the solution to everything. We know that the people who are being attacked by extremely advanced arms do not have access to similar research or arms to defend themselves, and that could by no way be correct. So if we take such simple facts and decide to start from them, I think it helped me understand many conflicts, and I do think it does help. And we also have a duty to do the analysis when the people impacted are not here to do it. I ask people all the time, whenever they see anything on one of the countries we work with in the media, to ask themselves, what do civilians think about this? What do women think about this? Simply because Libyan women are not allowed a seat on any table here to say what they think. And it's our duty to bring what they would think. Just the question at least. When somebody suggests sending far more arms, or bombing more, or killing more, what do women think? If they're denied a seat, we need to fill their seat and say what they would have said. And it doesn't have to be an entire policy briefing and policy recommendations and a million things. Just very basic things that we know for a fact they would have said if they were allowed a place on any table we have a place on. I'll stop here. You're more than welcome to discuss any of the points we raised, as we do in the countries we work on. I just want to raise 2 points before I conclude. The first one is our Secretary General and a few peace laureates, Nobel Peace Prize laureates, last year went through the Balkan routes, and they walked with refugees all the way to Germany to see with their own eyes what is it like for refugees. And they have made a few statements. One of them is asking for safe passages for people. One of them is looking at the gendered impact of this move. And one of them observations that was quite horrific was that women fell out of jurisdiction in most European countries where the rule of law is actually good, when there are some sort of gendered laws. Like, for example, there are countries where there is very good law on sexual violence. However, it simply doesn't apply to refugees because they fell out of the legal system, and that's extremely, extremely harmful. Obviously, to the people who are subject to such violence, they were subject to this violence by the police, but also the state shied away from individuals who are applying it to them. But it's extremely harmful to women from these countries when violence comes back to the streets and is back on the social scene, when they have walked a few steps beyond it over the past years. So that's something we need to look at. So safe passage and everyone's access to justice. The statements are available. I'm happy. Drop me an email, and I'm happy to send it to you. They're also in our WILPF website. And I'd love to hear more of your thoughts, or any questions you have, any things you think we should be doing, and all your thoughts on